Hi, Siad. How are you? Hi, Daniel.
Hello, Deck. Hello, guys. Nice to have you here.
No, thank you, thank you. We're going to discuss today why is regenerative farming so important. I always actually, I'm not actually not always, but I'm always going to be talking like mentioning the title at the beginning of the podcast, I guess, because it will later on go on YouTube. So yeah, it makes it easy to find them. How's your week, Siad?
Yeah, it's fine. Hello, Mohammed. How about you, Attack?
My week is going good.
Great, great.
Let's speak. Hi Sam. Hi Sam. We'll give it a couple of minutes before we begin our discussion. Let's start. So this today's discussion is going to explore why is regenerative farming so important. Um, so yeah, Sayed and there was another person here, but they're gone now. But it's okay. I guess yeah. Why is regenerative farming so important? Are you there, Sayed?
Yes, yes, I am there. Yeah, so as the term suggests, the farming, regenerative farming, like, so actually it's important because, like it will help the environment in terms of like supporting it and all. So, like, I would like the guys who are like more expert in the geospatial side to have their views on this. Like Sam is there and Mohammed is there as well.
Oh, sweet, sweet. The Mohammed is speaking now. Sam might be doing something. And Kennedy as well. So yeah, why is regenerative farming so important, Mohammed or Kennedy? Are you there, Mohammed?
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, there seems to be an issue with my microphone. So yeah, I think for me, I think there are a couple of concepts that would make regenerative farming so important. For me, the first thing is the sustainability of it all. If you look at the way regenerative farming is done, it's sustainability is at the core of the practices that we do in regenerative farming. So I think some of the retrogressive farming techniques that people have adopted in the past, and some of them continue to adopt, are not necessarily they're basically a means to an end. You see that people are farming, but their productivity is diminishing year after year, year after year. And productivity, the products that they get from farming, or maybe the profits or the amount of produce that they get, continues to diminish year by year. But if you look at regenerative farming, we are talking about a technique of farming where we are getting good produce from the land, but we are also preserving the land. We are preserving that productivity so that we can prolong the amount of time that we can get very good produce from the land. So I think sustainability is very important, and it's one of the defining factors in regenerative farming.
Great. Thank you for that. Sam?
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I just had to connect via my mobile phone. I don't know what's happening to my computer. So basically, this is an interesting topic. Actually, it's so much in line with what I've been doing this week. And I'm coming to think about it, like the entire idea around regenerative farming. If you look at the natives, like the olden days, guys used to practice a lot of regenerative farming. In terms of the farming practices they used to perform, what they used to do with their produce, and the measures they used to take care of their land. So I think that has depleted over time, and I think we just need to get back there where we were in the olden days. Because the entire aspect of it's not like a rocket science. It's not like rocket science where you're going to teach these guys new skills or new tactics on how to go about this. The entire thing, like most of them already have. If you look at the population of farmers, most of them you find they quite have an experience. Like they've been doing this for over a period of over 30 years, and by that time they used to practice this kind of measures. So for me, it's important because when you look at the entire topic of regenerative farming, in terms of what the benefits that you can have, are more so what we are looking for as a solution in this planet, because there's so much that is happening, so much globalization that has happened, and I think also shying away. Most guys have been shying away from agriculture because of the issues of like making a livelihood out of that. But we've seen a trend where guys are going back to agriculture, and this is actually is good. And we hope that if more people practice these good measures of regenerating the environment, rejuvenating the environment, the atmosphere, and all that, I think it would be a good idea in terms of enabling or having a sustainable environment to live in. And the benefits span, of course, in many ways, it comes in terms of health-wise, in terms of economic improvement, and all that. So it's something that is important to preach this gospel at the moment, because, of course, it's never too late, and we need to gear or to get ourselves ready for this. Thank you. Attack.
No worries. Kennedy?
And maybe just to echo on what Sam was just saying, regenerative farming is not necessarily a new concept. I think so many people have thought about it even in the past. So many people have practiced it even in the past. And basically, it's not a new concept. But I think right now, what we do have is better technology that has really brought out the benefits of regenerative farming. And we are seeing it becoming mainstream. But for me, the way I see it, it's not really a new concept. It's not really a new practice, but the betterment of technology, the advancement of technology, and access to finances farmers can now access better technology, they can access better tools, they can access better services. It's made regenerative farming more mainstream, and now it's getting a lot of airplay out there, and everyone is really looking to do it. So I think for me, it's not really new, but yes, we now have a lot of people coming into the space, a lot of farmers coming into the space, and a lot of service providers looking to empower these farmers so that they can really take up regenerative farming.
Is there a world where there is this movement of regenerative farming on the rise and industrial farming? And I guess like are these two groups going to exist, or will we see more industrialized farming, add-on practices that are currently in regenerative area?
Yeah, I think there are so many areas where we've seen this being a success. So basically, I've not been there like physically, but I know a couple of projects. Also here in Kenya, I know like there's an organization like there's Agra, there's an organization called Farm Africa. These guys have farming groups expanding to like tens of thousands of farmers. And they've actually like just the last May they've had a review of what has been happening in Africa, and they've done so much in terms of training these guys, trying to incentivize the various of actions around regenerative farming. Within Kenya here, I know quite a number of projects that have done so, and they've had tens of thousands of farmers reached. And you find, of course, guys are reporting more in terms of produce, more in terms of like growing their own food, which is basically good, and of course, it has its benefits. And of course, at the bottom line is all about making a living out of it. And at the moment, as you know, like more than 30% of like the modernized or guys who have access to technology are basically in farming. And when you look at the bigger scope in terms of like, for example, Africa, we have over 60% relying on agriculture. So there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of potential around that. So these projects are just some like work cases where it's proving possible. And of course, if you look at the entire narrative around regenerative farming, you'll find that like it's basically having a sustainable ecosystem. So having an ecosystem where you can basically have food all around the year, and this food translates to money for some families, and it also translates to other commodities. So basically, it's something that actually is now getting into the farmers' practices, and I know it's go big in the near future.
So actually, it seems to be costlier than the normal farming, the commercial farming, and also like not suitable for large scale agriculture as of now, right? Sam?
No, not really. The entire thing of the regenerative actually, in some cases, it's costless, if I may say so, because it's of course, most people tend to confuse regenerative agriculture with like organic farming. But think of an idea. For example, you have 1 acre of land, you are planting vegetables. Another side, you have maybe you've kept some chicken or some animals like cows and goats and all that. So the manure that you get from the cows basically gets to your vegetables or gets to your plants. And then the plants, once you harvest, it's food for these animals. You see, like you're saving cost. You're not buying fertilizer. You're not buying fodder for your animals. So these are some of the benefits or some of the cost-saving mechanisms. So if you look at the entire topic or the entire practice, it should actually save a lot in terms of the farm inputs that you require. And also think about like technology or information transfer, whereby you are thinking of this guy like an ecosystem whereby it's self-sustaining. So what you get in one section provides for the other section, and if that cycle is there, then you don't even need to rely on either importing stuff to your ecosystem. You just need to be a sustainable ecosystem by yourself. So it should be cheaper in this sense. And those who have done it actually have proven to be it's so cheap in terms of costing.
Okay.
I'm wondering, is it possible to do that at a large scale farming?
That's what I was asking as well.
Okay, large scale, I think it's relative. So of course, imagine someone who is doing maybe 100 acres. I don't know, like if 100 is large scale. I don't like. There are very few large scale projects or farming projects in Africa. For example, let me take a case of Africa. But of course, if you go to other countries, some countries, you may find like guys are farming tens and thousands of acres. So in some cases, yes, it can work really well. It's only that, of course, we have some. The technology has come to bring other, or like has brought other issues such as like boosting the ecosystem for performance, whereby you use either hybrid fertilizers or use hybrid seeds or crops. So of course, there's that aspect where a farmer would be like, I'm after money. So at the end of the day, I have to make good money. So I have to use something that is cheap, that is, even if it costs me something, but it will give me the returns in a very short period and something of the sort. So I think in the large scale ecosystem, it depends with what you are really doing. Because I think for those guys, for example, who do things like large scale chicken farming, you find that the manure they use it to plant the maize, which basically produces food for their chicken or for the animals. So there's that aspect, but of course, regenerative farming or regenerative agriculture is quite wide. So you might not be like implementing all the factors or following all the principles of regenerative agriculture. But basically, it just starts as a process. Of course, if you test something and it works, then you find that it really it's okay for you. A good example is I have a farm actually. I do pig farming, and you find that I have free range chicken more than sometimes I usually have more than 500 on the farm. So I never buy feed because the manure from the pigs produces maggots which are eaten by the chicken. So like that kind of an ecosystem, like it's self-sustaining for the chicken. So it just starts with an idea, and then once implemented, of course, you can now roll it out to the larger bit of the farm or bit of the ecosystem.
Hi guys, Kennedy here. I'm having a bit of a cough, so I can't talk much. But yeah, I just wanted to chime in on the discussion. I think from where I stand, regenerative finance, as Sam says, there are so many aspects to it. It is a multidimensional, a multidimensional way of doing things, a multidimensional system. So you have people who do things like no-till farming, which is basically avoiding turning over the soil, turning over the breaking up the soil and turning it over, and instead you use techniques to plant whereby you just plant with the ground being the way it is, and you just plant, you just make whatever holes are needed for the specific seeds. And then this of course has the benefit of it retains soil moisture because the soil is not being exposed. It prevents carbon from escaping into the atmosphere. So it has a variety of benefits. Of course, when the soil remains with moisture and there's more carbon in the soil, then the plants will perform better. So there's that dimension that farmers are doing it because it's going to be good for their soils and it's going to lead to better yield. But on the other side, it's also good for the planet and for the environment because when you restrict this carbon from going into the atmosphere, you are reducing emissions. And so when I think of regenerative agriculture, I think it really cuts in multiple ways. You have those things that farmers are doing and they are good for them, even without the benefit of being paid to do that. They're still drawing benefits out of it. They're getting better yields, their soils are retaining fertility, and so it's good for them to do that. But especially now that we are seeing this whole movement around refi, it's interesting because now you have more benefits to regenerative agriculture. It's not only going to make the farmers get better yields, but now they can also be able to capture the evidence of doing this, and they can be able to gain something from that, in the sense of maybe creating carbon credits or some other credits. So from where I'm sitting, I think regenerative agriculture is multidimensional. There are various things within it. Organic farming, as Sam says, is one of them. You have that circular economy. You have the no-till. You have sustainable land management practices such as mulching, which is basically putting, dead plant matter on top of the soil to kind of like protect it from the elements. You have so many things that can be done, even putting up structures within the land so that the topsoil is not carried away. So there are so many things that are being done within regenerative agriculture, and as the word implies, it's all about regenerating the land. It's all about making the land sustainable so that it can be able to produce both today as well as in the future. And I think why I think this is so important is because especially as we are facing climate challenges. I think finding sustainable ways of being able to produce food is very important. We need to find ways that can be able to, I think we are starting to move beyond mitigation these days. Regenerative agriculture does help with mitigation, but it's also a form of adaptation at the same time. So it mitigates the emissions, but it also helps farmers to adapt to the new regime, and it helps them to become, resilient to these climate change issues. So the reason why it's so important is, when you think of Africa, especially where a lot of people depend on agriculture, and a large section of the population is involved in active farming. It just shows you that if there's enough capacity building, if there's enough mobilization, and if there are enough incentives, then there are so many people who can do this. And the net effect of all of these farmers practicing this kind of agriculture is that there is so much that can be done in terms of the climate fight or climate change fight. So you can have so many emissions being prevented from getting into the atmosphere. You can have sequestration being deepened and having more carbon being, captured within the soil. And I think that cumulative effect will be very powerful, and not just within Africa, because I'm thinking even internationally. Thinking of especially the global South, where the majority of the population relies on agriculture. You can imagine in the future a paradigm whereby all of these farmers have incentives to practice regenerative agriculture. Then it might get to a point whereby even the carbon that is being sequestered itself is actually a lot. So this is one of the most exciting things for me, figuring out how farmers have been doing regenerative agriculture for long. As Mohammed said, it's not a new concept, but what is new is the mechanisms that are coming up to incentivize these actions. So when we're thinking of refi, when we're thinking of regenerative finance and how farmers can actually benefit from the effort they're putting into regeneration, I think that is something that is new and it is very exciting. So from where I'm sitting, I think it's really important, and I look forward to working on this field and seeing how we can be able to bring this to more farmers around the world. Yeah.
That's really really interesting. Thanks for that. I really want to touch on like productivity, which I think Sam mentioned. And I guess like how can productivity improve in for farmers, engaging in regenerative activities and farming.
I didn't catch that well. You said what?
You mentioned before about productivity, And I'm just wondering, like, how can farmers increase their productivity? Yeah.
Okay. Let me give a very good example. One of the practices around regenerative farming is the issue of mulching. So of course, as Kennedy mentioned, once you retain soil moisture at good levels, and of course, with the current issues with climate change, like some areas where we rely on in terms of food, like food baskets, we are currently not getting enough rains. So a method is an ancient method, but it really works, like the issue of mulching, like covering the soils. So basically, even if there's so much sun, of course, the soils won't dry up. Your crops will continue growing, and yeah, basically, so you intend like if the soil retain water for longer, your plants will be able to grow and you'll be able to achieve more compared to someone who like the soils were disturbed. There's no cover on the soils. Everything disappears. So when it doesn't rain, like they get either poor yields or no yields at all. Yeah. So that's just one example. There's so many examples into which this comes into play. And of course, as I mentioned, like there are a number of principles that are around within regenerative agriculture. And if you look at those principles, if you combine them, it's geared towards helping the person or the farmer doing this. And it's not only the farmer, but also any other participant in this sector. We have those guys practicing agroforestry, like planting different kind of trees. Of course, we had a space where we were discussing about the type of trees. There are some trees that, of course, rejuvenate the environment. There are others that deplete the resources. We have some trees that take up a lot of water and lose it to the atmosphere. Others that retain the water on the ground. Like there's all that narrative around what is being done, and now you go to the specifics. Which kind of crop? Like what is the cover? Is it a perennial crop or is it a seasonal crop? Like all those are ideas around coming up with a regenerative and consistent. So in this regard, of course, if you look at the productivity from a high level, there's so much in terms, because productivity is not only like what you get from the farm, it's also the quality and also fresh environments to live in. So of course, if people are healthy, they'll work better, they'll work more, and they'll achieve more. So that is my idea around the whole of that concept.
Yeah, if I could also chime in on that a little. I think there's also the aspect of, when regenerative agriculture is practiced at scale, and here I'm thinking about maybe like within a community, a farming community, you're having not just one farmer doing regenerative agriculture, but multiple farmers within that community, and then it ends up being something that the whole community is engaged in. Then you start seeing other forms of productivity as well in form of other ecosystem services. So thinking about soil is always tied to water. Soil and water go together, especially when you're thinking of landscape level insights. So you can imagine a situation whereby farmers in a particular watershed are all engaged in regenerative agriculture, and because of some of the good practices which they are putting in place, you are reducing the runoff when it rains. Instead of the water just running on the surface and into the water bodies like rivers, you're having it percolate and go into the ground. And this has several effects. Number one, of course, it makes the soil moist, so it can be used for longer, as some says. But number two, it also recharges the groundwater. So when regenerative agriculture is practiced the right way, and especially at scale, it can then start to have landscape effects, where now we are not looking at plot level effects that are happening within a particular farmer's plot, but rather landscape level effects that are happening within the entire landscape. You're going to have, you're going to be seeing more groundwater recharge. The aquifers are going to be healthy. Whatever is being released downstream into the rivers is going to increase, so the volume of water in the rivers will increase, and essentially it just makes the whole ecosystem more productive. And here I'm not just talking about productivity in terms of food, but also in terms of ecosystem services, whereby we are saying things like, fresh water in good quantity. That is an ecosystem service, and it's very beneficial to the people who are living there. So regenerative agriculture has that potential of, not just transforming what is happening on a particular farm, but rather impacting things that are very wide scale. And I think that is one of the big things we need to keep in mind. Of course, as Sam says, there are so many things that go into regenerative agriculture. One of the things that I'm thinking about is, especially, there's a guy I was speaking to last week. I think he was from Zambia, and he's working there with local farmers in a particular town, and they're doing some great stuff. And because of some of the activities that they're doing, they are increasing, the numbers of pollinators, bees. And so because of their practices, they're encouraging more bees to settle in that area, which leads to, bees provide a very invaluable service in terms of the ecosystem services. They are the ones who do the pollination, and they allow us to have food. So, there are so many benefits that can accrue from regenerative agriculture. It's never just a single thing, it's always a multidimensional thing. And I think that is one of the things which we need to keep in mind, especially as we're thinking about encouraging regenerative agriculture. We need to think about the bigger picture and what we are going for. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is the actual difference between the organic farming and the one that we are mentioning here, the regenerative one? Sam, if you can give your views.
You difference between regenerative farming and regenerative what?
No, actually, I'm asking like what the difference between the organic and the one that we are discussing here, the regenerative
Ah,
one.
okay. Yeah, good question. So, regenerative, when you look at the regenerative agriculture, it encompasses so many practices. And one of those practices is the issue of organic farming. So organic farming, we can basically term it as a subsystem of the big umbrella of regenerative agriculture. Because organic is all about like using what is produced in an ecosystem, like a self-sustaining ecosystem, which is basically an advantage to the ecosystem, and then you'll be practicing regenerative agriculture. So one is under another. Okay, so organic farming is under regenerative agriculture.
Okay. So it's basically a type, like a type of regenerative farming.
It's a practice more of it's a practice.
Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
okay.
Yeah. And if I was just to elaborate on that some more, I think one of the ways in which organic farming becomes, like a part of regenerative agriculture is that you are reducing the agrochemicals that are being put on the land. So you are avoiding the use of, pesticides that have issues like, we've heard so much about glyphosate and things like Roundup. And a lot of the times when these agrochemicals are used, what tends to happen? Sometimes it will rain, and the rain will wash these chemicals down from the land into the rivers, and then you end up contaminating the water bodies, and you end up having eutrophication and all of this other stuff. So by reducing the use of such chemicals, you're actually regenerating the land because you're removing some of those contaminants that lead to problems downstream. And I think that is actually more pertinent. I see on the chat we have Jax from Neptune Chain, who are actually working on some of these issues. They are looking at how tobacco farms are affecting freshwater bodies like lakes in Texas. So maybe Jax can be able to give us more perspective around, especially how such activities tie into what they're doing.
Hey, thank you for having me today. Yes, I definitely think I can speak to some of this. Uh, it's a really, it's a really intricate and uh, I guess very interconnected system here. Uh, when you look at nutrient levels and nutritional value in food for the past 50 years, it's basically gone off of a cliff. And I don't think that this is any coincidence at all. What we're seeing in a lot of the places around the world is that there's serious soil degradation, and all of that's tied back to the water quality as well. Uh, what we're working on in the US is actually in the Chesapeake Bay. we're trying to develop a framework for nitrate uptake, right? And essentially the idea is that it doesn't belong in the water. It's very harmful when it's in the water. It causes a lot of serious public health crises. And if we can get it into a field or a strip of vegetation, then we can then turn it back into the soil and essentially work with farmers to ensure that they're putting forward their best regenerative practices. What we're really looking into is vegetative strips, nutrient strips. Essentially, how that works is that you put a crop in between your actual cash crop and you put some sort of vegetation, whether that's clovers or even a set of trees that are responsible for uptaking the nitrogen that's in the receiving waters next to your land. You can also do cover cropping and no-till farming, but it really depends on what watershed and what water body you're on. From what little research we've done into the Chesapeake Bay, we believe that nutrient strips have the most potential, though we are working with and talking to farmers that are doing other best management practices to actually generate credits as well. Hopefully that gives a little bit of insight as to what Neptune Chain is doing and the reason why we're really targeting this. Kennedy and Sam, to give you a little bit of a background on me, I don't actually come from the environmental expertise or from water quality. I'm actually in finance and accounting and financial advisory services. So I worked with PwC for quite a while until I learned about some of the clientele that they had and what I was actually supporting. And then I wanted to turn my accounting experience back into carbon and nutrient accounting. The real issue is how do you gauge the level of real world value that you are contributing to, and how do you protect investors to make sure that certain safeguards are up so that they know where their money is going before they've actually put their money there. I come in on more of the finance and tech side of things, but I'm really interested and have been learning a lot about soils and just some of the differences in soil profiles. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jax, and glad to have you here. I think I just want to touch on what you've mentioned, the idea of vegetative strips. I've seen this being used a lot, especially in Tanzania, where I worked a couple of years back. So I think when we went there was a lot of monocropping, where you're finding people growing something like only maize or something of the sort. And then that idea for the vegetative strips was introduced, where you find people, planting like a row of maize followed by a row of something like beans, or some other legumes. And this, as you're saying, it does reduce the amount of the nitrates that gets washed down into the water bodies. So I think that is also just to point out to say that is another practice yet again, the strip cropping and avoiding monocropping. Those are other ways in which regenerative finance is practiced. And Jax, I think that's really interesting that you're applying accounting skills and finance to solving environmental issues. This is really great, having this confluence of different skills, different industries coming together to tackle environmental challenges. I think this is what leads to, very sustainable solutions and innovative solutions being developed. So it's really exciting to hear what Neptune Chain are doing. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. There are two sections of refi, right? And there's the regeneration and there's the finance. But ultimately, it's going to require a really multidisciplinary team to address some of the issues that exist in current water markets. The whole reason why Neptune Chain is created and really serves a purpose is to make these nutrient markets much more accessible and as transparent as possible. When you're looking to remove nitrate or phosphate as a voluntary participant, it's pretty hard to actually get your hands on the credits. And even if you look at it in the US, at least, when you're talking about water quality trading, you're typically going to be talking about compliance markets. the costs for sourcing credits are just astronomical, right? And I think that Web3 can be used to not only help the investors and help the market participants, but draw down the costs of actually doing business. So I just have to really agree with you. It's going to take a lot of different talents, and I think more importantly, it's going to take a lot of different talents that are interested in learning what the other party has to offer. I've learned so much from Ed, who's also in this call, about the history behind nitrogen and phosphorus in the water, and even some of his local issues in Amherst in Massachusetts. So it's just really great to hear some of the stories, and I would love for Ed to also share any of his thoughts on water quality if there's time for more of the conversation to happen. But thanks.
Yes. Ed is someone who's been recommended to us a lot. So we'd love to hear from you, Ed, and thank you for your patience.
Hello, all, and thanks for that. And for the communications I've had with Jacques over the water issues. I come from regenerative agriculture, from being not a big-time farmer, but working with a lot of farmers and doing some farming involved, so that I got experiential experience from farming, and for many years. And basically, regenerative agriculture is decades old in development. It's a farmers' movement, and we've pretty much based it now on coming up with the 5 principles of soil health as the universal language that we use to communicate with other people interested. The things that no matter what farm or what landscape you go to anywhere in the world, the way nature works the same. The difference is the context, what we call context, and that adds the local context, the culture, the food, the soil, the weather, all the other things. But that if you take a practice and you implement it, you look at how it compares with those 5 principles of soil health, and that's a general guideline that seems to be working well for everybody. Certainly for water quality, it's huge. I mean, farmers have been a little frustrated because of just the talk about carbon low. Farmers certainly know the value of carbon in their soil to keep their soils alive, but water is also an incredibly important part of that cycle. I think I actually mentioned to Jacques, I heard from a recent farmer in Iowa in the U.S., which is, pretty much a toxic, agricultural industrial system out there. A bunch of farmers in his particular county happened to decide to really work on regenerative agriculture. And these are farms with hundreds and thousands of acres within a county. And they've all pretty much gone to using cover crops, which is one of the most important things we're discovering, other than just reducing tillage, is all your cover cropping and as companion plants. But what he's found is all the brooks and streams in their county now are running clean. And that's like unheard of in Iowa and to that level. And they're starting to do some testing on it because they've just realized there's such a drastic difference. So plus for rain, I mean, we're going to have droughts and we're going to have floods, and there's nothing you can do better to do that than with land stewardship than to use those 5 principles that are used in regenerative agriculture, so that we infiltrate water and get it into aquifers and get it filtered through the system instead of running off into streams and lakes and oceans. So, and that's a huge problem we're going to have with oceans, is just the CO2 level and the contamination, all the dead zones in the world. But I'll leave it at that for now, and anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I had a question. I just checked out your profile and you have like 40 years of farming experience. And I just wanted to ask, when it comes to regenerative agriculture, you've mentioned one practice, which is cover cropping, which you said is among the most impactful. So maybe my question is, do you think some practices are better than others or more impactful than others? And would you say that there are some practices that also require more resources to implement? What has been your experience, and what do you think are some of the barriers to farmers implementing some of these regenerative practices?
I think we find I know a bunch of major consultants that work in many countries around the world and with hundreds and thousands of farmers. And the biggest problem is, as we sort of say, is between the ears. It's the mindset change. It's understanding about working with nature. We spent so many years thinking that nature was competitive with us. And so, as one of our farmers, it's a leading farmer in the U.S., Gabe Brown, says, I used to wake up in the morning and think, what do I need to kill today? And now he wakes up in the morning, he's like, how can I add more life and diversity? It's going to benefit the balance of the ecosystem. So that's the biggest thing. And most farmers gain because they no longer need to buy the insecticides, no longer need to buy all the sides that are the chemicals, the so much of the synthetic fertilizers, so much fuel to plow and till and cultivate and deal with the weeds if you're in the old organic system. So economically, it's that's why a lot of the farmers, like in the U.S. at scale, the larger farmers transitioned to regenerative because they were losing their farm because of all the input costs. And I see that all around the world. It's the magic seeds that cost 2 or 3 times as much. It's all the jugs and all the bags and all the inputs, and then the farmer ends up getting not much for his product. And that's part of the system that's controlled too. So I don't think it's as much as an economic problem. Even for some of the poorest, I think that's the benefit of it is nature provides a lot of services basically for free. All you have to do is, the whole thing is learning and understanding how nature works. And it's down to the personal level of starting to understand who the organisms are and what are the critters and what's in the biome of the plant and the soil. And, the same as we try to understand what life above Earth is like. We know the difference between a lion and a squirrel and an ant and what they do and how they affect things. And yet we know nothing about what's in the soil or in the, we know about the human biome now, but the plant biome is fascinating. So I think a lot of it's just, first it's a mindset change. And then second, it's really getting past our indigenous sensing knowledge of nature to actually now the abilities to actually know what's going on and how those functions work. Because what we want is a functioning ecosystem, and we need to know where the missing links of what we're doing are that are not completing that functioning system. The whole thing, just like a car or something, it's missing tires. It's not going to roll, it's not going to work. So got to think of everything. And that's what regenerative farmers that have taken the lead have really been doing, is understanding everything we can about how nature works and how to work with her instead of against her. Thank you.
Well, that's really interesting. So it sounds, from what you've shared, it sounds like, as you're saying, there's that mindset, but it also sounds like knowledge is also a big part of that equation. Farmers figuring out what works, what is good, and basically, I think there's a lot of capacity then that is needed in order for farmers to know how to practice regenerative agriculture properly.
Let me add, in my profile, my Twitter profile, I have a link to a YouTube playlist with about, I think it's got maybe 20, 21 videos on it right now. Covers pretty much everything about soil and related that's sort of the cutting edge of science and understanding in these areas, and that I've been able to aggregate. So if people are really looking for, I spent a lot of time sorting out ones that I thought really were true science, and spoken to people in a way that, and farmers and people interested in this, that they can understand too. It's even some scientists that learn how to talk to people. Thank you.
Well, that's awesome. I'll go check out your profile, and maybe it's great that there are people who are putting such content up on YouTube. When I think of especially Africa, I think one of the biggest problems might be that knowledge barrier. So I think such resources would be great, especially if they can get maybe translated to some language that rural communities in different parts can understand. Yeah, I think knowledge has a big role to play in regenerative agriculture. Yeah.
That's something that I think some people within the country need to do. If they, take what people that can understand English and take, and learn what we've been learning, because I gather it from people all over the world. Many may be English speaking, but others they've learned from people who aren't. And then you just need to translate it then into your own. That's the context issue that we have with the regenerative agriculture. That's that principle. 5 of them are basically about how nature functions. The 5th is context. And that's adapting that knowledge into your local area and your culture. And so that you speak it in the way and explain it in the perspectives that help people to understand, because it's going to be very different from a farmer in the United States who's been told to do something by academics and corporations for many years. And so I think that's what we're going to have to do, is learn how to, get all this knowledge in, because as I said, all the principles are universal. We just need to put them in the language and context and perspective so that everybody around the world can understand them.
Awesome.
Hello. Hi. I just I wondered if it was possible to introduce the initiative that we've just launched. I think it's relevant to a lot of people in this space, so I just wanted to put the heads up, because there's lots of hopefully there'll be lots of future funding opportunities for regenerative farming projects. So we are the Carbon Removal DAO. We're launching on the Earth Fund platform. Hopefully next week, if the Earth Fund DAO votes us on, which we're very hopeful that they will. And the point of the Carbon Removal DAO is it's a collective to fund community-led grassroots carbon removal projects. So these will be regenerative projects surrounding nature-based solutions. So anything from reforestation to restoring wetlands to transitioning to regenerative farming. And the idea is to get funding to small community-led projects on the ground. And so the funding's going to happen in funding rounds. And each funding round will focus on a different aspect of nature-based carbon removal. And of course, regenerative farming is a huge part of that. And yeah, so if anyone wants to find out more, please reach out. And in particular, I'd like to hear from community projects on the ground, particularly across Africa and Asia and South America. Really looking to connect to interesting projects, or with farmers looking to convert their land. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you so much for that, and we wish you the best with the DAO. So yeah, and quick question. In terms of the farmers, you said converting their land. Are you talking about like small farmers, or more like community groups of farmers coming together?
Honestly, it could be either. So to receive funding, people need to submit project proposals. And to submit those projects, we need verifiable individuals. That's just for safeguarding. But absolutely, you could be an individual farmer with land that you need funds to transition, to buy seeds for cover crops or whatever it may be. Or you could be a community collective. The grants will vary in size. So for sure, some grants will be perhaps more suited to individual farmers. But this is the kind, I feel like it would be great to talk to farmers on the ground. I'm not from although I've worked on farms, I'm not a farmer, and it would just be great to hear what is the most useful form of grants. Should we be targeting groups of farmers and community groups, or should we be targeting individual farmers? That information would be really, really useful.
Well, that's very interesting. And I had a question, especially now that it seems I haven't seen a lot of projects in the space that are actually, investing in activities. It seems like, especially in the refi space, a lot of projects are looking at, are looking at rewarding regenerative activities that have already happened. You guys are taking a different approach whereby you are actually funding the application of these practices. So I think that's really interesting. One question I had is, do you guys have some monitoring, reporting, or verification to check that whatever projects that you guys funded were actually executed and that they had the impact that was intended?
Yeah, that's really important. So we have Earth Fund has just launched their MRV, and it's so Earth Fund, I should say, is a decentralized crowdfunding platform. You could maybe compare it a bit to something like GoFundMe, which is the Web 2 version, but it's essentially very different because it has this idea of causes, which are DAO governed collectives that are focused on different issues. So the Carbon Removal DAO will be the second cause to launch on that platform. It has community governance via the Carbon Commons token, and it will have its own crowdfunded treasury. And we're hoping for maybe having some sponsored funding rounds from organizations. But yeah, so that gives us this amazing ability, as you said, to fund projects to get started in the first place, because I think that's an issue. There's so many people who would love to convert their land and would love to regenerate and reforest or rewild or transition to regenerative farming, but they just don't have the funds to do it. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg, because once you've established your project, then you can potentially get future funds for carbon offsets. So yeah, that is the goal. And on the point on MRV, so we don't have, obviously, because each DAO focuses on a different thing, we don't have a robust strategy specifically for regenerative farming or for carbon removal projects. However, what we're relying on is to receive updates from the projects after they've received the funding. So, and we're going to have constant engagement with the community. And so that's really the main safeguarding we have, is that, well, sure, we'll send you the funds, but then the community will absolutely expect to get regular updates on what you've been up to and what you've been spending the funds on. And, we'll be checking in to make sure that you're doing what you intended to do. And we understand that in the natural world, you can't control everything. Maybe there's a drought, maybe something happens, but at least everything is trying to go towards the mission that the project set out to do. That's our main strategy.
Okay, that's really interesting, and it sounds like a really good mission. We would be very happy to support you guys at Shamba. I believe the oracle that we are building, which is an ecological oracle, sorry, it provides data about what is happening in the physical world. I think that might be something that might be useful to your project, especially from the MRV side. So I'd be happy to connect later and maybe have a conversation around how the Shamba Oracle and the data that we provide might be useful to driving the kind of impact that you guys are seeking to have. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, I would love to connect. DM me and we can set something up.
Awesome.
Sam, did you want to say something?
Not okay. Just a point to add on the discussion. So basically, I think I've listened to what Ed has been talking about, and it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of activities going on. There's some guys who have actually adopted these issues of regenerative agriculture fully and have practiced them for years. So I think there was one aspect that I remember someone asked me last time, and I think it would be a good one to catch it here. So in terms of like the benefit of like when you consider a regenerative or a regenerated earth or an ecosystem, so there's this new, or I don't want to call it new per se, the issues of eco credits. So I think trying to bring the issues of eco credits to these farmers, like in terms of capacity development, knowledge transfer, and access to information. So I think it's also another new avenue where I think guys practicing regenerative agriculture would benefit a lot from. So the whole of that ecosystem, achieving not only like getting money or getting value from what you grow, but also what you practice on. So like think of like eco credit where communities, a large area, like a community can benefit this a lot, can benefit from. And I think most of the RFI projects that are there at the moment, you find that they're trying to address that issue, and it will all down to the kind of tools or the kind of practices that they have or the kind of approach that they decide on. Because I think, as we've mentioned and what we've heard from the other speakers, these practices are not as much, they are not new to us. We only need to enforce them, or we need to practice them. And at the end of the day, like we are benefiting while we are conserving. So that aspect, that cycle of incentivizing the entire ecosystem is also key. Because I think there are so many projects trying to tackle these. Some of them are getting it right. Some of them probably it will differ from place to place. So we also need to think in the lines of that, whereby as much as we preach this gospel of regenerative agriculture, we also let people know about this kind of new avenues of like generating income and also being able to ensure that we are regenerating the planet. That is from my side. Hello, can you hear me?
Wait, no, thank you. I was talking and I was muted. Sweet, thanks so much. If there's no anything else anyone would like to add, but I would just give it. Oh, Jacqueline, yes, go ahead.
Hey, sorry about that. I just wanted to put one last point out there. As we're hearing about more of these regenerative farming projects turning up, and with the more funding and financing that they'll need to actually exist, I think one important but often overlooked aspect is enforcement and the enforcement layer of everything that's going on. MRV is seriously important, yes, but I also think that there is a layer of enforcement that needs to be added for investor protection. And it's very, very, very critical to take your time and build a system that is effective and transparent, I think. So I just want to commend all of the projects that are building in public and taking their time to build a product that's going to be truly beneficial, and support some of these practices here. So thank you for hosting this discussion, and I'm looking forward to the next one too.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate all you guys coming and contributing and giving your knowledge to the community. So we really, really appreciate everything. So we're gonna close the room since we've been talking for 1 hour. We would have loved to continue to talk, and obviously we have this room every Friday, so always welcome, always welcome to listen or come and contribute. So thank you so much, everyone. If there's no one else have anything to say, then we'd love to close the room in that case.
Thank you, Attack. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice weekend.
Cheers, everyone.